What's going on, everybody? Welcome into a fresh hour of CBS Sports HQ. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. I'm Jacqueline D'Agostino. I'll be with you for the next hour or so. Football season, it is so close, and the Cowboys and the Chiefs report to training camp today. Has us getting excited about a certain particular matchup on Thanksgiving on CBS. So get your turkey, your sides, post up on the couch with the fam, and you can watch Patrick Mahomes and Dak Prescott duke it out. It's the second meeting ever between these two organizations. The Cowboys won back in 1995. That was like their glory years, right? Winning 24-12. Patrick Mahomes, this is kind of crazy, playing in Arlington, Texas for the first time in his NFL career. I can't believe that. As mentioned, the Chiefs returning to training camp today will try to make their way back to the Super Bowl. Only one of four teams to make it to 3 straight Super Bowls. Is it going to be 4? The Chiefs also looking for their 10th straight division title this season. So the quest for success for KC starts today as they head to training camp. All right, so let's welcome in our NFL analyst, Rashee Douzable, here to discuss. Rashee, we have talked about the Chiefs so many times, right? And we kept saying last year, if there's a season to get the Chiefs, yada, 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 it is this season. We said that this time last year. Lo and behold, they make it to a Super Bowl. They have reloaded in the offseason, so I don't think that's the same conversation about Kansas City this go around. How do you feel about all of their offseason moves as they head to training camp today?
Yeah, respect has to be paid. You talked about it, Jacqueline. Going to 3 straight Super Bowls is very tough to do, especially with the changes to rosters year in and year out. You talked about the additions this year. We'll get into that a little bit later. With some of the moves they made on the offensive line, bringing in a guy like Josh Simmons in the first round, to me, he's probably the biggest X factor when you look at it going into the season. On the other side of the football, right? I mean, at the receiver position, Hollywood Brown is a guy that missed majority of the season last year, who was a guy that came over to Kansas City to try to win the Super Bowl with them, but didn't play that much as well. So had a clavicle injury. Now he'll be able to be thrust in the offense. He was there all off season. So look forward to him in this offense. You see Patrick Mahomes versus in 2020 and 2024 when he lost in those Super Bowls because of the defenses on the other side, the Bucs defense and the Philadelphia Eagles defense. So when you look at it, the biggest question for this team is probably the offensive line. Have they refortified and retooled that? Because when Patrick Mahomes was under duress, he lost 2 Super Bowls. When he was upright, the guy wins in the Super Bowl. So that's the biggest question heading into this season for them for sure.
All right, let's dive deeper into that, because protecting Patrick Mahomes, that is priority number 1 to your point. So if that is the part of the equation that has the biggest question marks, might be a little concerning. And you already alluded to it. You lose Joe Thuney, right? But then you draft Josh Simmons, who you said you think is going to be the biggest X factor for the Chiefs. So where are you at? What do you make of that complete overhaul on the O-line this offseason? I know you said you had a lot of questions about it, Rashee.
Yeah, you see the turnover from 2024 to 2025. Joe Thuney played at guard, and he was an all-pro there. But because of the injuries at left tackle and then also performance-based, they moved him to left tackle, Jacqueline. He's no longer there. He's in Chicago. You see Josh Simmons right there entrenched. But they also brought in a veteran in Jalen Moore, who was a spot starter in San Francisco. Kind of reminds me of a guy they took a few years ago in Jawan Taylor, where there was a lot of upside. The issue with Jawan Taylor is we haven't seen that upside come to fruition. He's led the league almost in every bad category from the offensive tackle position. When you talk about pre-snap penalties, you talk about holdings and pressures given up. So that's why I said, Jacqueline, to me, Josh Simmons is the biggest X factor, because he's coming off a patella tendon tear. And if he's actually healthy and ready to go, he could push to start at left tackle, which means Jalen Moore may be able to kick to right tackle, and Jawan Taylor could be your swing tackle. This will probably be the most depth they have at offensive tackle. But the caveat to that, Jacqueline, again, is if Josh Simmons is healthy. Also, we talked about it. Joe Thuney is gone. There'll be a battle inside between Mike Caliendo and Kingsley Suamataia to see who's going to start at the other guard spot opposite of Trey Smith. So some moving parts with the Kansas City Chiefs. That's why I think this is the biggest question for them. But if Josh Simmons can stay healthy, that could be a big X factor in protecting Patrick Mahomes.
Again, to your point, we know what happens when you can't protect Patrick Mahomes in a Super Bowl. We saw talent on full display against the Eagles. Kind of transitioning now into a very serious situation with Rashee Rice. He pled guilty to that street racing charge in a car crash in Dallas. He's going to receive 5 years of probation and 30 years of jail time. But regardless of that sentencing, he's going, 30 days of jail time, he will be a full participant at training camp despite that sentencing, Rashee. So how do you anticipate the Chiefs are going to handle this whole situation?
Yeah, the interesting thing is, Jacqueline, they played majority of the season without him last year. And to your point, they still made it to the Super Bowl. Now, obviously, you want Rashee Rice there because when you look at the first 3 games when he was healthy, 2 of those first 3 games, he had over 100 yards in each one of those games and was proven that he could be a true #1 receiver. But again, to the point, the Chiefs still made the Super Bowl with him missing majority of the season last year. So I talked about Hollywood Brown earlier. Also a guy like Xavier Worthy, who really came on strong and had his best game in the Super Bowl. 8 targets, 8 receptions, 157 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Look for those 2 guys to really step up if and when Rashee Rice gets a suspension early in the season and misses somewhere between 3 to 7 games. But to the Chiefs' point, and the caveat to that, Jacqueline, they played a majority of the season without him and made it all the way to the Super Bowl. So they'll be ready whether the suspension happens earlier or later on in the season.
All right, we had some signing news for the Chiefs because the Chiefs and George Karlaftis agreeing to a 4-year, $93 million extension on Sunday. And, Rashee, there were some murmurs that this deal was going to happen at some point during the course of training camp, but they do get it done right before. So how important is it for them to get a deal like that done before training camp even kicks off?
This is just good business by the Kansas City Chiefs. You see it right there, 24.5 sacks since the 2022 draft class, which is the second most. Only Aiden Hutchinson has a little bit more than him. He's been one of their more consistent players on defense. When you look at the last 2 years, right, 10.5 sacks in 2023, 8 sacks last year. He constantly gets to the quarterback, and I know they have Chris Jones, and he gets all the news clippings and everything, but George Karlaftis has been very consistent on the edge, getting after the quarterback. And you see it's second most on Chiefs in that span behind only Chris Jones. So when Chris Jones gets doubled and triple teamed, Karlaftis is the guy on the outside that can bring that pressure off the edge. I thought this was really good business by the Chiefs because say he goes out there, Jacqueline, and gets 8 to 10 sacks again. Next year, he's going to be demanding somewhere between 25 to 27 million. They were able to get him for a little over 23 a year. Good business done by the Chiefs. Now, the next biggest question is Trent McDuffie, who was in the same class. When are they going to do his extension? Because that corner market money is getting out of the stratosphere right now with Sauce Gardner just eclipsing Derek Stingley Jr. at $30.1 million per year.
Yeah, it was the 0.1. It had to be just over, right? That's how they do it. But whether it's the corner business, the receiver, the quarterback, pass rusher, it is all going up, Rashee. So I know you kind of already touched on the biggest question mark for the Chiefs in regards to the O-line. So ultimately, what do you think would stop the Chiefs from going to 4 straight Super Bowls? Is it the O-line questions, or is there something else that could keep them from doing that?
Yeah, to me, it would be the O-line questions. I mean, there could be a question at corner outside of Trent McDuffie, but I think the biggest issue, and it was the most glaring issue in the Super Bowl, is can they protect Patrick Mahomes and keep him upright? Because we saw it on the graphic earlier, Jacqueline. In the 2 Super Bowls he lost, he was under a blitzkrieg when it comes to the defensive line, just taking over and controlling his offensive line. So, again, I talked about Josh Simmons being the X factor. To me, he probably would have been the first offensive tackle taken off the board if he was healthy. A patella tendon kind of scares a lot of teams. He was probably the most athletic offensive tackle and a guy that really gets after you in the run game. He's the biggest X factor because I think if he's healthy, you slide him in the left tackle. Jalen Moore could kick over to right or compete with Jawan Taylor for the right tackle position. Now you have some subsequent depth at the offensive tackle position, which they didn't have, which is why they moved Joe Thuney to left tackle from his all-pro guard spot last year. So if the Chiefs want to get back to another Super Bowl, I think they've tried to refortify this offensive line. They have to mesh throughout training camp, and to me, it's going to come down to Josh Simmons being healthy.
All right, Rashee, we certainly appreciate it. Previewing the Chiefs' upcoming season as they head to training camp today. And we are counting down the days, of course, until football is finally here. Returns September 7th. And a reminder, you can watch your local game live on CBS and, of course, stream all the action on Paramount Plus as well.